Thank you for staying with us on TVC Breakfast. Well, members of the House of Representatives from the 17 southern states have welcomed the tax reform bills presented before the National Assembly by President Bola Tinubu, describing it as good for the country. The tax reform bills were transmitted by the President to the two legislative chambers of the National Assembly for consideration and passage. The Southern Caucus in the House, led by Honorable Nicholas Mutu from PDP, Delta State, however, made its position known at a press conference in Abuja where the caucus welcomed the bills. According to the leader of the group, the Southern lawmakers welcomed the tax reform bills with much excitement, even as they say they were open for dialogue with a bid to represent the people's thoughts that were absent in the proposed law. Joining us now via Zoom for this conversation is investment banker and development economist Naemeka Oberiri. Thanks a lot for joining us, and good to see you again. Well, of course, as you're following, the Southern Caucus have said, okay, yes, given somewhat cautious acceptance of the bill, saying that it's still pending dialogue, still seeking dialogue. That's also reflective of what the Southeastern Caucus is saying too. They are also calling for wider consultations, which brings us to the issue of truly how fair and inclusive these proposals are, really, especially in a bid to have a better run economy.
Thanks for having me. I've actually done a lot of articles on this. The tax reform bill is needed as of now, and it's a very, very extensive tax transformation bill that was put together by Taiwo Oloyede team. We should appreciate them for what they've done. Now, it's not a perfect document. There are some issues that need to be addressed, but that is not why anybody should advocate for this to be thrown under the bin. I think, just like any document, it can be fine-tuned, but I will encourage the other lawmakers to make sure that they support it and to let it pass through the two National Assembly, House of Assembly. Now, back to the crux of the matter. I know one thing that worries me so much is that those who are opposing this bill have refused to look at the advantages. They're only interested in one thing: the derivatives, the derivations that comes out of it, and which is very, very worrisome. They are thinking about how to share the cake. Nobody's thinking about how to bake the cake or how to create a conducive environment for the cake to be properly baked. You know, the crux of the argument is, the VAT sharing formula is about to be changed. Rather than people getting the VAT allocation based on phantom population size and land mass that have nothing to do with productivity. That is, things are being, is just going to, we are rearranging the waterfall in such a way that more will be given to those who raise it by word of consumption. I expect any right-thinking, any patriotic Nigerian as a leader to be thinking about, how do I harness the advantages of this bill to make sure that I put in place the conducive environment, ease of doing business, to attract some of those businesses that will make more of the VAT revenue waterfall be captured in my state. And it also brings us to the issue of fiscal federalism and why we must go all the hog beyond even the VAT waterfall. We need to put Nigeria back to the 19th constitutional framework, fiscal framework, where resources are raised and retained 50% by the constituent units where it is raised, 30% paid into the central pot, and 20% to the federal government, with the exclusive list limited just minorly to internal relationship and the external security. We need to look back and have that discussion now, because this VAT has revealed a lot of things about Nigeria. Now, if the argument is about the rate, that the rate is high, that we need to reduce it, it will be a different thing altogether. And I want to encourage, Nigeria is a place that is so blessed. I was sharing with somebody yesterday who told me how last week the naira raised gained so much and today is going up. I said there are no fundamental backing it. But we can actually create the fundamental basis for us to build an all-inclusive, prosperous nation that is beneficial to everybody. Nigeria has no business even having 0.1% poor people in Nigeria. And I said to the person, look around Nigeria, look around this place, look at what happened between 1960 to 1966, and how we had a productive economy then and what is happening today. I'll give you instances. In the north, we have 64 million hectares of arable landmass. If the north today decide, okay, they want to work with President Tinubu's government, we want to create 2,500 agro-industrial clusters, 1,000 hectares each. We want to borrow $15 billion to do this, $6 million each. And if you look at the numbers based on what we have done, that alone will create about $109 billion revenue from that region. That alone will create about 7 to 10 million jobs. That alone will create about 125,000 agro rangers that will help them to decimate the whole of the criminals. If the Southwest governors can come together and say, okay, our father, Obafemi Awolowo, will build the Southwest economy or the Western economy using cocoa. Out of the 19.3 million hectares of land, let us devote just 3 to 4 million hectares to do cocoa plantations in clusters across the world. That will unlock about $54 to $90 billion. That's, I'm sure, President Tinubu will work with them to do. If the Southeast governors can say, Dr. Michael Labara built the economy of the old Eastern Nigeria using coal and palm oil. At a time, we controlled 45% of the global palm oil market, which is today sized at $72 billion. And they say, okay, we want to develop across the 1246 electoral ward in the Southeast, 500 hectares of new palm plantation, the Terra species. We've done the framework on how it can be done under the what I call the missions, community, diaspora, private-public partnership arrangement. That we are going to borrow $2 billion, $5 billion to do it. That will unlock about 20 to $70 billion in the Southeast. The people will work with them. And if we have, so I tell somebody, if we have $500 to $1 trillion revenue coming to the economy, and we say, okay, we are bringing tax rate down to 2-3%, we will have more than when we have $10 billion or $50 billion general revenue for such a big country like Nigeria, and we're talking about VAT of 15% or tax of 10%. Because 3% of $1 trillion is better than 20% of $10 billion. So what we should be thinking about is how do we enhance productivity? How do we produce massively in Nigeria, create so much job in such a way that we will have enough revenue from productivity that tax, which is the cat, will not be placed before the horse.
So looking at some of the provisions of this bill, the bill proposes to increase the VAT rate incrementally from 7.5% to 50% by 2030, with exceptions for essential items like electricity and baby products. So if you look at it, to what extent do you think these VAT exemptions can mitigate the financial system on low-income households while still achieving desired target goals?
The truth is, if we are to look critically at the challenges we have today, even if you increase VAT to 20%, if there's no productivity, if there's no purchasing power, you will collect nothing. Nigeria today, look at our tax to GDP. We have one of the poorest tax to GDP in the whole world. And it's just because of the level of poverty in this land. Over 197 million Nigerians, as I talk to you, currently live below the World Bank threshold of poverty, which is $64.50, 110,000 naira per month revenue, and which is very worrisome. But look at South Africa, 60 million people. I looked at South Africa revenue waterfall in 2022. $125 billion. $81 billion came by way of different varied range of taxes. And the minimum wage in South Africa is about 212,000 naira equivalent. So what we should be thinking about, if the argument is, let us not increase VAT, let us even do this. Because if you look at the new tax regime, it actually favors the poor. It actually, puts more burden on the rich. And somebody was saying, okay, if they put the burden on the rich, it will cascade down to the poor. I said, no. In an ideal situation where people are thinking positively, nobody wants to remain at the lowest base of socio-economic pyramid where he will be the one receiving rather than given. That's what we call the American dream. The American dream is simply where a poor church rat can wake up one morning, begin to dream big, and he will become a billionaire overnight, doing the right things. Invented. Look at Elon Musk. Migrated from South Africa to Canada and went to US to go to school. Today, he's the wealthiest man in the whole world and the second most influential person in the whole world, just because he was able to put his skills to work and invented things that have added value to humanity. What we should be thinking across, and I plead with our leaders and the led, is for us to look back inward and be patriotic. We can argue, okay, even if you charge tax 50% and there is no productivity, you're wasting your time. tax is actually a derivative. It actually comes from productivity. If there's no productivity, there's nothing to tax. You cannot tax on emptiness. So the argument should be, and I want to play with President Tinubu, he has been an advocate of Sovereign National Conference. He has been one of at the forefront of preaching fiscal federalism, even before he became president. He should mobilize the APC and the political leaders. Let us go back to the table and rejig the constitutional and fiscal framework of Nigeria back to what we used to have between 1960 to 1966, something that was agreed to. Remember that before independence, our forebears met, had different summit and conference, and they agreed on a constitutional and fiscal framework that recognized our diversity and our strengths. And that was why you had so much cannot pyramid in the north, the cotton, the textile factories everywhere in the north. You had the cocoa and the cocoa value chain in the west. You had free education in the west. You had the palm oil, the clinkers and the limestone. You had the palm oil across the middle belt, and Nigeria was very productive and prosperous. And if you look at the pounds of Nigeria then, it was more powerful than the US dollar, more powerful than the pound sterling of the UK. As at a time between 1960 to 1970, even during the Civil War, Nigerian pounds even gained against the dollar because we had a productive base. Our GDP per capita was better than what we used to have today. So every effort should be channeled. Let this tax bill pass. Now you can after bills can be amended. If the argument is okay, reduce the rate, then we will reduce the rate. And then if the argument is okay, let us even, because I heard the argument, the tax, the VAT derivative waterfall does not conform with the very revenue sharing formula in Nigeria. It's even a time for us to say, okay, let us even discuss this very important matter. Let us go back to that fiscal arrangement. Let me tell you, there is no state in Nigeria that cannot produce at least $10–20 billion revenue annually. If the governors can sit down and
kindly hold your thoughts at this issue. You know, one of my takeaways from you is that you are very much in support of Nigeria boosting its production across all the regions in the country. But then you've also spoken about, you know, your bid for the president, but to perhaps drive this process. But aren't you hopeful that this could be thrashed at the public hearing stages when the National Assembly reconvenes on the matter?
I don't think it will be trashed. I don't think this issue, the National Assembly, you know, there's something that worries me here, and I even want to believe that most of the people who are opposing this document have not taken time to go through it. And I will encourage them to go through this document, to read those 4 pieces of legislation. You know, and I will also encourage them to look beyond the myopic, to look beyond the selfish interest, to look beyond what are we getting, to what are we bringing to the table, and what values are we raising to make Nigeria a better place for all. You know, when I hear certain segment of Nigeria always speak about what is shared and how it's going to be shared, and they don't speak about how we are going to even bake a bigger cake. Even people was bringing the cake and giving everybody small. It worries me. You know, at a time in this country, please go back to history and look at the revenue from 1914 to 1960. You will see something that will shock you. Crude oil for Nigeria should be a working capital. We're not the only crude oil producing nation. Nations like United Arab Emirates, nations like Norway, nations like other countries, crude oil is actually their work. Singapore does not have any natural resources anywhere. 5.16 million people. They have a bigger GDP, 3 times than Nigeria. In fact, 1 out of every 50 Singaporean is a millionaire in dollar. So what we should be thinking about is how do we build an economy that works? How do we reject the physical? In fact, I encourage National Assembly members, we are those from the north, to begin to use this opportunity to say, okay, let us even review the whole derivative formula. Let us even review the whole fiscal revenue, fiscal resource generation, and revenue sharing formula. In such a way that to encourage each and every one of us to look inward. You see, the earlier we do this, the better for each and every one of us. I don't want this thing to keep on this bickering. The tax bill, I've gone through it, and anybody who is very, very honest and sincere, who is not being selfish, anybody who is very productive, who understands what it means to be productive, will support this tax bill to pass. And I'm sure they will do the right thing.
It's one thing to think about how much we share, you know, from the proceeds of this tax that is generated. And it's another thing for you to think of how you want to spend this money. And then the Presidential Committee Chair, Oyedele, is saying that tax reform bills also specify what states and councils can spend VAT on. So meaning that, as I understand it, they won't be allowed to spend it on white elephant projects and some other things that are not, captured under what you can utilize this fund on. How do you see this? Do you see it as I'm giving you money and I'm telling you how to spend the money?
It's a very good development. And I will also tell you something again that the tax reform bill is bringing to the table. The issue of multiple taxations. I'll give you an example. I run a company that owned a massive rice mill in the north. We cited it in the north because of proximity to access to raw material. Because anybody who is smart will tell you, you locate industries near the source of raw materials. Now, today, a bag of rice is selling for 105,000. It's not supposed to be so because we actually produce and made those rice at average cost of about 70,000 per 50 kg. If the logistics issues are be sorted out, we can sell this rice at any corner of Nigeria for 80,000. But I will tell you one thing that happened. We moved some bags of rice from the factory to drop in Owerri and Umaya. If the vehicle from Abuja to Boko to Benue State, we didn't have so much issues of multiple taxation. But immediately we entered the Soka, from Soka to Enugu to Onitsha to Owerri. They extorted from my driver 545,000 naira, multiple taxes. You see the amount of emblem, amount of useless criminal emblems. It's not as if even, okay, at a point I asked, okay, can you give me the revenue account of the state? Let's pay the money local government. No, they will always have POS around that they will use to extort money. It's like a criminal enterprise. What this the reform bill had done is going to eliminate this multiple taxes. Like today, if we say, okay, it's a centralized spot under our gun, hacking permit, you're a commercial bus driver, you guess it, nobody stops you along the way. First of all, it will ease movement of goods and services. It will, because at the end of the day, these taxes that were collected, criminal taxes that were collected, multiple taxes, will be put on the final price of the product. And it's Nigerians that will suffer it.
But so if I get you correctly, sorry, if I get you correct, are you saying that this tax reform bill will definitely address the issue of multiple taxation that we tend to experience, on the roads by with Agbero? For instance, some of those goods that are coming from the north.
It will.
So it will mark the end of the multiple taxation we see on the road. Is that correct?
Exactly. Multiple on the road, in the marketplace, in every other places. I want to see Taiwo's team took out time. In fact, I want us to commend that team. They took out time. It's not a perfect document because if you're a very smart investment banker, you will always find
right, Mr. Obieri, we've run out of time. We've run out of time, but perhaps in 1 minute, I hope our back-end team would agree. There's still the concern of whether we have that machinery in place for a centralized tax administration system.
It's not like a centralized tax administration system. Like I said, in every nation, there's always an internal revenue service that is centralized. Like I've always argued, we can put in place a structure where the states or the regions will receive this, and the central body, because of course the whole plan is also for us. Another advantage that we have forgot is we are going to match all the revenue collection into a national internal revenue service agency that will do this. It will also stop leakages. The kind of leakages you see from the NIMASA, from MPA, from customs will be stopped, and we will save a lot of things that have been lost through corruption and leakages. So I think this discussion needs to be taken further.
Absolutely.
If we decide today, which is the best thing for us, to go back to the constitutional and fiscal framework, revenue, resources, generation and distribution, water fund that worked for us between 1996, it will help us. Let the regions, let the state receive their revenues and taxes, and let the central internal revenue services monitor it to ensure that nobody diverts it, and then we'll allow it to be shared the way it should be shared.
Nnaemeka Obieri, we thank you very much for your contributions on the program. We sure hope to speak with you on these issues in subsequent editions. Thanks again for your time with us.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up, House of Representatives